We continue our discussion on the characteristics of living organisms, of living systems, such as animals. Um, as living systems, animals are expected to demonstrate a number of traits. They must be able to metabolize the nutrients that they um, consume internally. Animals also show the capacity to grow, to be able to respond to their environment because of a trigger or a stimulus, be able to reproduce and have um, specific or distinct life cycles. Animals also show adaptation or the capacity to survive in the environment that they're living in response to biotic and abiotic factors in entirety. And of course, inherently, animals as living systems have a natural organization from the molecular level up to their to the species or organism level, and also in extension um, as members of communities within a specific ecosystem. Now let's discuss these characteristics one by one. So, metabolism is the sum of all reactions in a dynamic system, particularly chemical processes that living or particularly um, all the chemical processes that are within a living organism. No? In order for that organism to maintain life, of course, it's daily or real on a regular basis. Okay, it has to metabolize. The animals need to metabolize. Okay, and there are two important concepts I'd like to emphasize. We have first catabolism, which is the breakdown of complex molecules into simpler ones. Usually, in that process, a lot other things are or other components are involved. So here in this illustration, you can see a polymer that is broken down into two molecules. So you can appreciate the presence of a water molecule, the introduction of a water molecule, also called as hydration, and at this juncture identified with an orange arrow, the break point of the two molecules that are end products of the catabolism or the breakdown of this larger or polymeric molecule are essentially separated at, no? So in the presence of water, complex polymers such as carbohydrates can be easily broken down into simpler structures. Now, on the other hand, we have anabolism, also known as the, the um, also known as synthesis, okay, because we're producing complex molecules from simpler ones. No? So they're together, or essentially simple molecules are put together, and in this process, energy is usually stored, and water molecules are removed. So there's what we call the what we call dehydration, where water molecules are released in the process of simple molecules joining together in order to produce complex ones or polymeric ones. Okay, so um, at the cellular level, okay, so we can further talk about metabolism by looking at this illustration. So, the at the cell level, okay, nutrients that can serve as substrates for much needed atoms like carbon, they can be taken in by the living cell. No? These nutrients can be usually are complex ones. They're big, and as they store energy, they cannot be directly used in their current form or their current state. They needed to be catabolized or broken down into simple molecules, into intermediates, okay, in order for the cell, for the living system to make use of the energy that is stored and to uh, be able and to contribute to to necessary processes where such nutrients or simple molecules are needed, no. Then, as you can see, the catabolism byproducts include simple molecules, intermediates that can, additionally, these during catabolism, there are also release of waste products like carbon dioxide. So for the case of animals, catabolic processes usually lead to the formation and release of carbon dioxide. Now within the cell itself, I want you to understand or remember that catabolic and anabolic reactions are not um, are not sequential activities. So they happen parallel with one another. And in most instances, catabolic byproducts which are simple molecules are later used by the organism, by the living system to produce um, biomass, to produce new material through anabolic reactions. Okay? Now, just to show a more illustrative example. So here, we're seeing the difference between the cellular activities of the liver cell of a squirrel that is in active state in panel A and a squirrel that is in hibernating state, panel B. So essentially, according to this article, the liver cells of an active squirrel, um, especially during in preparation for winter, okay, in preparation for winter, the liver cells are active in producing lipids. So lipid synthesis is anabolic reaction that keeps on, or that is very active or very profound during the time or during the state that the squirrel is preparing for hibernation. And when hibernation season is already activated, is already present, okay, the squirrel's hepatic or liver cells will now transition to a state where instead of producing lipids, it will carry out oxidation of fatty acids more. So it will make use of the stored energy, the stored chemicals, in order for the animal to survive through the winter. So this is a very good example showing us the interrelationship between anabolic and catabolic processes and in the context of an animal system. Okay? Now, um, aside from the capacity to metabolize components or nutrients, no, animals also show growth. They grow over time. So when we say that um, when we talk about growth visually, it is the process of uh, increase in the size of the organism, increase in the size of the animal. In this illustration, you can see a cat from being a fetus, from being a newly born kitten to being an adult. No? So in invertebrate animals, growth is a more of a visual trait, no? That we expect all animals to increase in size over time. But in other representative groups of animals, okay, like the invertebrates, no? their life cycle or their growth is not very straightforward or not very visual as it appears compared to the growth in vertebrate animals. So here we can see different types of life cycles that invertebrate animals undergo, from being an egg, a fertilized egg that will continue developing, okay, or that will develop and eventually grow into an adult animal, adult invertebrate animal. We can see two potential life cycles. So there is a direct life cycle where the egg will just give rise to the adult animal, the adult invertebrate animal. And there are instances in which that egg will metamorphosize or will transition to an intermediate state. Okay, so usually, and this intermediate states can be of two types. So there's planktotropic intermediate or a lithotrophic intermediate. So a planktotrophic intermediate means that the egg has become an intermediate has transitioned into an intermediate stage where it's freely swimming. It can move, can hunt for material, or essentially hunting is dictated by the fact that these planktotrophic organisms or planktotrophic developmental state must consume must consume nutrients exogenously or nutrients from the environment. No? On the other hand, a lithotrophic intermediate will not require or will not be bound to, will not be required to move, to hunt material, nutrients for its successful development. And where does it depend to? It depends to the reserves that it already has, that it already possesses. Usually, the reserves are from the maternal side. No? So, lithotrophic, meaning there is reserve material that can support the development of the animal into a full-grown adult without the need for the intermediate stage to be freely swimming, or for it to be intentional in looking for material from the environment. Okay. Then we have another trait of living organisms, of living things, which is their capacity to be irritated and to respond to a particular stimulus. No? So I have here a video which I'd like to show. So here. So this is a colonoscopy. This is a colonoscopy snippet. And what you are seeing is a portion of the colon of the patient undergoing the procedure with a parasite. This parasite is called Diphyllobotrium latum, which is a parasitic worm, usually usually originating from fish. So eating raw fish in some people or patients can lead to the parasitic invasion of this worm, no, of this animal. Okay, and what you're seeing is that the light of the colonoscopy instrument somehow is causing reaction to the or causing eliciting reaction in the side of the animal or at the on the end of the animal, that it's moving, keeps on moving its segments because of the stimulus. Okay, so this characteristic or this trait of animals, which is their capacity to respond to stimulus, to different types of stimuli, is of course connected to some other higher order functions, such as course, their inherent nature, or the inherent their inherent nature to protect their body, to protect their stability as living organisms. Okay. Then we have reproduction. So we've talked about the biogenesis theory, okay, where living organisms come from living organisms. And essentially, this relates to reproductive activities, to reproduction. And we have two types of reproduction in animals. Sexual reproduction is a kind or a mode of reproduction where the new offspring is usually just produced by a single parent. So there is no like opposite sex parents, that there's no need for opposite sex parents to be present, or to be present in order for an offspring to be produced. So as an example, we have here Hydra species budding, and that bud later on becomes another individual species. We also have binary fission in Euglena species, where a single euglenoid cell later on divides and becomes two. No? So that's asexual reproduction. On the other hand, okay, sexual reproduction, I think you're probably familiar of the difference, or you already have a hint of on the difference. So sexual reproduction is a mode of reproduction that will involve a complex life cycle in which a gamete with a single set of chromosomes combined with another gamete that also possesses a set of its chromosomes. And that combination totals or adds up to be and becomes the total number of chromosomes for that organism, for the offspring, for the progeny organism. So as examples, we have leech, and most vertebrate animals most vertebrate animals demonstrate sexual reproduction. That there is a need for a male gamete and a female gamete in order for a progeny to be produced. We'll talk about more on these characteristics as we look at the different groups of animals. No? And during or after the act of reproduction, we see that the fertilized egg, the animal that will eventually grow, undergoes a series of developmental stages. No? Here we can see the commonality between an invertebrate animal and two vertebrate animals during the early stages of their development. No? From during cleavage, blastulation, and gastrulation. We can appreciate how from a single cell, the multicellular state of our developing embryos, whatever it is, may it be an invertebrate animal or a vertebrate animal, shows a lot of similarities, or possesses very similar structures, very similar processes. Okay. Then we have the trait of adaptability or adaptation. So this is a nice picture showing how colored moth can disguise itself, no, in with its background, or with can disguise itself along with its background, so that it will not be recognized and potentially become a prey. The dark colored moth is really doing survival level adaptation in order for it to not to be consumed or not to be identified as a potential food by other animals or by other living organisms. No? And by categorization, we have different types of adaptations. So there's structural adaptation, physiological, and behavioral. No? So structural pertains to the morphology of the animal, how the different parts contribute to the animal's everyday life, how those parts are suited for the animal's survival. Like we have two examples here. Ducks and geese, as well as swans, they have webbed feet that will help them swim to look for food. And on the other hand, a terrestrial animal, a rabbit, have large ears in order for them to listen to sounds that can indicate that a danger, a predator, is nearby or is going to attack them. So these are structural adaptations allowing the animal to survive. Then we also have physiological adaptations. Like for the case of this fish, bluegill fish, which survive cold winters by modifying the activity of their body. Their metabolism slows down in order for them not to consume a lot of energy, and the fish will move slowly so that whatever reserve of nutrient it already possesses, that reserve of nutrient can be efficiently used. Now we also have hibernating bears. During winter, okay, their bodily functions change such that they will survive through the winter without hunting for food or even without consuming food. Okay. Then we have behavioral adaptations. Like a very good example are nocturnal birds like owls, that their behavior is adapted to sleep during the day and be active at night, because it's only at night that they're able to be efficient, that they can be fully efficient in hunting for prey. Okay. Lastly, we have the state or the trait of organization. So all living systems, including animals, demonstrate hierarchical organization. So from their atom up to the individual animal itself. Okay? So that's why we are approaching the subject. We're discussing a number of things, that not only the entirety of the animal, but we also go down to the cellular, chemical level. Because we at the end of the day, the most important, or one of the most important traits of living systems is there is inherent organization in each animal, in each living system. Okay, from their molecules, and the molecules that make up their body, their organs, up to their entirety as individual animals. Okay. Right. There are a few more characteristics that are very self-explanatory, and are already related to the ones that I've discussed so far. So all living systems, all living organisms have the capacity to assimilate, meaning the nutrients they consume, whatever they consume from the environment, they get to break down or make use of those make use of those components and assimilate them into their own body. Also, most of them have definite form, size, and chemical composition, which allows us, to classify them, to name them, to identify them to specific groups. Okay? Definitely, all living organisms have the capacity to move, to be mobile, to move from one point to another. And there's respiration, excretion, which relates to waste management. Okay, so all animals have that capacity. And the thing I'd like to discuss further is homeostasis. Okay, so here, actually, these are examples of unicellular animals, which are demonstrating all those traits that I've discussed in their everyday activities, and the way they during their consumption of food, during their movement from one location to another, their reproduction, their response when a stimulus or when a change in the environment, a change in the environment, be it temperature, acidity, pH, presence of salts, whenever those changes happen. Okay, so we these unicellular animals, or somehow some actually may say that they are not really animals, no, but rather are more to be considered as predecessors of animals. No? But as an example, so these unicellular organisms show the different traits of living systems. Now we zoom in to homeostasis. So I have two examples. We have management of salt water, or management of salts in the water that is consumed by a fish that is saltwater based. So a fish that lives in salt water drinks salt water, and in the process they can undergo active transport through their gills in order for the excess water, the excess ions to be expelled out of the animal body. Water loss through skin also facilitates the loss of water and the movement of ions. And as vertebrates, of course, they excrete urine. Okay, they produce urine where concentrations of ions can be made, or where ions can be concentrated. So these ions, our body will in nature has specific concentration of these components. So if there is an input that will produce or increase the concentration of these components, these ions, the body should compensate in order to maintain a stable environment. Then another example, I think this is the last example I have for homeostasis, which relates to thermoregulation. So different behavioral and physiological internal mechanisms in mammals, in avians are existing, or are being practiced by these representative animals in order for them to regulate their temperature, because these animals have a specific internal body temperature. That internal body temperature is supportive of their survival. So any increase in that temperature is deemed as dangerous. So the animal body should compensate in order to maintain that internal temperature. So there are several things that are towards the regulation or thermoregulation of these vertebrate animals. So that ends our discussion, our introductory lecture for our module number 1.